And we are live.
The first totally of the new year. Boom.
I know, right? We are back, y'all. Can you guys believe it? Like, oh, we missed y'all. We so missed y'all.
Let's see.
Who was the first person?
Yeah, who's the
Who do you
first?
think it was?
Yo, it has to be. Is this someone new?
It's a new person.
Well, I don't know. Who is it?
Deontay.
Hey, Deontay.
Hey, dude. Happy New Year to each and every single one of you. I'm Mark Monroe, and I am accompanied by my wonderful co-host,
Jolyn GC in the place to be.
Hey, and this is 2021. This is our first class of the year, and sorry if you hear noise in the background because apparently somebody decided to make burro banana fries, so that should be interesting. And I think my wife just showed up at home, and of course you hear the little prancing of Butter's feet. So I mean, clearly everything is just straight up active. So interesting. Jolyn, by the way, where are you?
I am at an undisclosed location.
That's fair.
With my lady of leisure activities, chilling. But you know, I had to take another. Well, I shouldn't say another because the first one was not a vacation, but you know, I'm taking a retreat of rest and relaxation. You know, so.
And you know, me personally, a part of this whole little relaxation, you know, finally got the cut. You know, looking a little fresh, a little bit better. Don't mind that person in the background. It's just one of the mentees. That's Aaron. So, hi, Aaron. All right. Whatever. Okay, so enough. So a lot of folks were thinking that he was like the quant. He's no quant, but he can get there. All right, so Jolyn, where do we even begin? I missed you. I'm like,
it's not like I hadn't seen you.
But I'm just saying, I miss doing this show with you. Yeah. Like, it's so much fun. Like, for real.
Why does it seem like it's been a lifetime, though?
I know, right?
Yo, I have had to be strong in not answering DMs right now because I'm supposed to be relaxing. And some of y'all are trying to have your girl work. So I'm like, I can't be looking at nobody's DMs right now. So Mark has graciously offered to answer all of your questions.
Oh, we got jokes today. Okay.
Yo, so Mark,
we should run a tally for how many times we make this dude laugh in the background.
I know.
And then for every single time that he laughs, he has to donate $20. Well, there's one.
Yo, okay, so let's talk about how did you do end of the year?
I did well. So for those that have been wondering, yes, 2020 was a pretty dope year. What you saw me post on my Instagram was actually not my 1 year, but that was actually like my 2-year performance. And for the first time, I was like, wow. I mean, of course, thank COVID, thank the Fed and everybody else. I mean, for that wonderful steroid shot. But that was 100,000% return in my overall portfolio. So
congratulations. Let me hold some.
I mean, I want to be like you. So, I mean, yo, let me hold something. I'll flip it. Oh. That's another one. All right. So
that is another one. I'm actually, you know what? What was really cool is that it wasn't just, just us or the people that we, are in our inner circle, whatever, talking about here. I made these, gains and all that.
Yeah.
Yo, a gang of cousins. Congratulations to all of you for the percentage gains. Y'all did better than many of these hedge funds out here that were sitting on the sidelines.
Yo.
Okay? Like some of them are only getting 12%, 20% returns. And the percentage returns I saw from you all were amazing. So congratulations for sticking to the script. And many people were new and they were still doing fantabulous. So congratulations to you all. I'm actually going to post mine a little later, but here's the thing, it throws off the aesthetic. So I thought I'm like putting it on my page.
Fair.
You know what I mean? So I might post it and then delete later or something. But I had, let me see, I was almost to 12,000%.
Well done. Well done.
So I'm excited because that is the highest that I've had so far.
We got to beat it now.
Oh yeah, I'm going for at least 50%, at least, or 50,000.
50,000%. I was like, girl.
Right. I probably got 50% today, just in a day alone. Okay, minimum.
Yeah.
So like my average though is about 1,000. That's
Okay.
the average. And usually, that's just what I would go for. So to
Okay.
see the hard work, granted, it was a pandemic, and I really do think that anybody could have made money in the pandemic year. Yeah, close your eyes.
Close your eyes, throw the dart, and then it's going to hit a target.
That's how easy it was. So it will be interesting this year going forward. Like you will see the line of demarcation
Mm.
this year. So I just say that to say, like, stay sharp, and also let the record reflect that I have never in my Black life used margin for these trades.
No, that's not what we practice.
No margin, y'all. So some of y'all might be using margin, and I just caution you to be careful. But I say that for me because um, this whole thing is new to me, and then the margin can be tempting. And I made a vow that I would not use margin; that I would only use my own money. And I have personal reasons for that. And one of those reasons has to do with not wanting to take on debt. Like I've been in that life. I've had debt before,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Prior to all this, I mean, I had credit card debt when I was in college, just super reckless. So for me, I just can't go that route. I just can't.
Mm.
Although I'm much more responsible now, I will say that. I'm much more responsible now. But
All right. All right.
yeah. So I'm excited. Again, congratulations to all the cousins. Congratulations to you, Mark. I will have a pitch deck ready, to propose some of my ideas of like why you should let me hold something. No, just kidding. I got my own money or whatever. So
I mean, honestly, it was just like a matter of like, and I didn't do this like the post for, for any, accolades or anything like that. I did that because of the fact that for each and every single one of you watching at home, and you'll also see it with Jolyn when she shares her performance, it's more so for you to understand that honestly, if you stay focused, like by focusing, we mean research, take the time with all the episodes in which that we provide. People are like talking about that there's over 80 hours of content. I guess this will be another hour that gets added to the content. But when you think about it, it's like use this content as your guide to research and also to build those muscles up here. So that way you can start looking towards like companies differently and ultimately exercising those muscles when you're ready to now execute. So focus, execute. I mean, that's really the separation between those in whom which that literally go on and do well versus those in whom which that don't. I mean, when you have all this noise around you, you got to blot out all the noise or separate yourself from the noise, focus, and just execute. That's it.
Yes, I totally agree. You ready to get into this market overview?
Yes, and because we got a full, like I said, you know what? I'm coming in hot today.
Hot. All right.
I got the blue to keep me cool a little bit for the, for all this hot, like red hot that's coming through. But yeah, so also, by the way, shout outs to each and every single one of you for all your prayers and support. I mean, my family, we're doing all right. And we're getting through it. I'm probably sure that just like each and every single one of you are getting through, well, you got through 2020. So, I mean, yes. we're here in 2021 now.
And I do want to say, I just want to acknowledge those of us that, are grieving. I just want you to be gentle with yourself, give yourself grace, and let the grief come when it comes. Like, you don't have to put on airs, it's tough. Okay. So take that time for yourself when you need it.
Mm-hmm. You ready?
I'm ready. So let's get into this market or whatever. Okay. So the Dow was up 167.71 points. S&P 500 was up 26.21 points. And the NASDAQ was up 120.51 points. Okay. Now for sector performance, as you all know, there are 11 sectors. We track the top three and the bottom three. So the top three, we got energy, materials, industrials dominating the top. And then for the bottom, we have utilities, consumer staples, and real estate.
Mm.
For our pick performance, we have 31 SIPs, y'all, which is subject to change. So just keep your head on a swivel. But we
Be on the
track.
lookout because the change may be in the wind a lot sooner than you think.
Yo, I'm with it. So we have the top three, and then we track the bottom three out of the 31, and you can find all 31 SIPs as they currently are right now by going to our Instagram page at that come up series.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm feeling kind of Harry Potterish.
I know, right? I was like, yo, that's wizard's chess.
So we got X, which is Steel, coming in at number 1, Oroku, and then K-Web. Then for our bottom feeders, we have Neo, Zscaler, and DHI, which is DR Horton. And so we had a 52-week high. And interestingly enough, the 52-week high that it was K-Web. So you all know that there have been predictions for China to have a really awesome 2021. So keep your eyes on these the Chinese market just to see what's happening.
Should I speak on this real quick?
If you want to, if you feel so.
I ain't trying to steal no thunder here. So I mean, honestly,
no, that's it, because we still have to. There's one other way before you talk about that though. We will be, when I come back from vacation, I will send a link. I'll post it on the Come Up Facebook page. And you can also find it if you follow the link on the bio. We'll update that when it's ready. But for the nonprofits that we're going to consider for 2021. We're still transitioning funds, so we're not taking on any new ones yet. But as soon as we close out,
that should be happening. We'll be closing out at the end of January for the nonprofits. So
yeah, some of them need that Amazon boost. So, well, we'll see what happens. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, so be on the lookout for that. Also, actually, I'm not going to say that part yet. Y'all are going to be upset later, but you'll be happy. But we'll talk about it later. Okay, and I think that's pretty much it. So are we ready to get into, talk about China?
Oh, so I mean, apparently, somebody from China had told us that, Jack Ma isn't, a missing person. He's just laying low. Now, for anybody that knows about what goes down in China, it's not been the first time that we've seen folks go missing. Especially when we have, like, for example, certain folks of a specific faith, out there known as the Uyghurs, and they are disappearing like clockwork, and they've been under scrutiny significantly. And honestly, it's kind of fishy that essentially that Jack Ma went missing after the same token that ultimately that China started to, rain down a little hard on after what he said about, their financial system as well as, their capitalism, efforts. And then all of a sudden he went under investigation. So call it what you want, call it what you will. But the other thing that you got to look at for China is and how they're also setting themselves up in the sense of resources, really. I mean, think about what they did, their RAPC deal with pretty much most of all of Asia. And then on top of that, they recently did a deal with Europe as well. And I'm probably sure they're going to do the same thing with the UK thanks to Brexit. So, the question is that a lot of folks are asking right now, and hey, you even see folks over there in the Middle East over there trying to come together. So it's just very interesting because, I don't see anybody talking to us, and, I'm getting a little I'm a little worried. But when we think about just, China in general and these internet companies, the question is that was this just a slap on the wrist as it pertains to hey, remember where you are located and remember essentially who has funded you significantly through the years? Or, could this be the start of something and ultimately we could be possibly seeing a little bit more pain ahead? Me personally, I think it's just a slap in the wrist, just to let them know that, hey, remember, we run this, not y'all. So I just pay attention a little bit, but outside of that, I mean, they're still great companies. And if you saw them at a discount, then kudos to you.
And this has nothing to do with that. I gotta change the subject right quick. But I put out my word and I actually have to revise my word. And regarding the planner, so many things just came up. Kiki and I are collaborating on that. So I promise you it's coming. It's different when it's a collaboration, okay?
Yeah.
Like we gotta make sure like voices are heard, minds meld, the creative, juices flow, all that.
I get it.
We did not forget about you though. So please do not come for me. Do not come for Kiki, okay? It's going to be awesome when it comes out. But product development, we take it seriously here at the Come Up. We don't just slap things out there and, put things together. And
we don't put together anything raggedy, y'all.
No, okay, you know how I feel about raggedy portfolios.
Let's get to class because I'm about to hear that tardy bell starts.
Yes, let's go.
All right, y'all. So, shall we get it popping?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Let's do it. Let me know if you can see it.
Yes, I can.
All right. Welcome y'all to 2021. This is our first ever class of 2021, aka innovation class. I think that each and every single one of you are going to like it because, one of the things that we did in the Matrix, and honestly, it's like our goal is, it's like you got to start sometimes seeing things from an institutional perspective of things. So why not also possibly decode one of our favorite firms? Now, if in the end, you'll be able to get an idea of who we're talking about. But, let's just go on with the session and see what y'all think. All right. So today we talk about the diffusion of innovation. Now, don't worry, we'll get to that in a little bit, but we ask you, each and every single one of you, where on the spectrum are you? Now, of course, when we look at, for example, what is diffusion of innovations, it's pretty much a model that attempts to describe how novel products, practices, or ideas are adopted by members of a social system. Now, of course, there's many different sectors as it pertains to a social system. You could be, say, for example, a person who innovates. You could be a person who's an early adopter. We'll get into that in a little bit, but let's just get a little bit more into the weeds, shall we?
Yes, we shall.
Blank over time. Now, remember this part. Don't notice the thing that you're seeing that is blank. That could be replaced with a few things. But what we really want you to look at is time. So when we think about time, it does not exist independently of events, but it is an aspect of every activity. Time is involved in 3 distinct dimensions of the innovation process. Now, we'll get into that in a little bit, but this is 3 parts. So today you're just getting part 1. So when we think about innovativeness, it's the degree to which an individual or other unit of adoption is relatively earlier in adopting new ideas than the other members of the system. So when we think about that, right, it's like pretty much, when we look at innovation, we look at it on a degree scale. Now, what does that scale look like? Glad you asked. Here we go. So when we think about like this degree and also where we look at it on the scale of things, here is what we know of as it pertains to the diffusion of innovation. Now notice on the first, we're going to start from left and go all the way to right. When we have the innovators, they represent a very, very small group. So for example, who would those innovators be? Those would be like your Elons of the world, your Steve Jobs of the world, hell, even, I guess I could say your Bill Gates of the world, your Tristan Walkers of Walker Company, also known as Belleville. If you don't know anything about that company, you should definitely check him out. But he's also an innovator. So they represent 2.5% of really this entire scale of the diffusion of innovation. Now we look at early adopters, right? Or AKA your change agents. Now that group is a little bit larger where you have about 13.5%, possibly we'll just round it up to 14%. Now, when we think about these groups of folks, we think about them like, you know them, right? Everybody in their social circles have those folks in whom which that you know somebody who got it the first day of, and they like literally either they were the folks that I guess we can call them the folks that went out and like stayed early at night just so that way they can get the first pair of Jordans that first came out, or say for example those iPhones, or say for example they were the early adopters of a lot of the technology. So for example, if you bought a Tesla Roadster back in the day, you were an early adopter, or the Model S when it first came out, you're an early adopter, and for any of its other product releases. When you think about folks who buy those large TVs or those 8K TVs that have just came out, those are early adopters also. And the reason why we actually have to pay homage to them is because of the fact that we don't just look at them just because of the fact that they just paid so much significant money that honestly, if you would have just waited like maybe a week or two, then you would have not had to stand in the cold, and you would have pretty much just been able to buy your product. But the reason why they do that is because of the fact that they're onto something. They're literally passionate about what it is that's coming out. So they're passionate about the innovation. They literally love it. When we think about also early adopters, they can also be early adopters when it comes to, let's say, cryptocurrency. You know, how many of you were actually trading cryptocurrency, you know, maybe almost, what was it, 7 years ago? I mean, I think it's six years ago, something like that. Something, I mean, we're getting old, so whatever. So when we think about it, right? Just imagine like, you know, that person who spent like hundreds of Bitcoin on pizza back in the day. Or that person who was like, well, Bitcoin's not really moving. And he literally just like threw away his hard drive and that had like 7,500 Bitcoins on it. And then he literally like shut down the entire trash company's dump site just so that way he can go search for the hard drive when Bitcoin blew up. You know, I feel for him. I imagine how he feels right now, but you know what? That's a whole nother situation. So we're going to just move on from that. Now, we also think about it as it pertains to folks. Well, we'll get to that. We'll come back to this. We also think about the early majority, or AKA your pragmatists. So once you've had like your early adopters that have come into the foray of things, then now you start to see parts of the larger part of the market start to step in. And so now when you think about it, these are the folks in whom which that now they're starting to buy at larger scale. So for example, they're just like, okay, well, I'm just going to literally see that, okay, hey, that I've been hearing little rumblings about this. Maybe I should go check it out. Now, of course, they're like, you know, they're not as risk averse as, say, for example, the next group, which is your late majority, AKA your skeptics. Like, I don't know if I really fully believe in that. I need to see some of the kinks worked out. So, for example, they're going to wait for after the folks in whom which that are the early majority. Now they're going to be the folks that jump in and they're like, okay, hey, I'm going to wait for the bugs to step out. So, for example, I got my Model 3 when it first came out. Now, there were other folks that got their Model 3 waiting until after, say, for example, the time that I got mine, and they got theirs, like saying, okay, hey, let's wait for all the quality control issues and all those other things. Or like, hey, I'm going to wait until after I see the reviews on an iPhone that's coming out before I make the choice to buy it. Or, you know, a multitude of different things, right? They're just waiting. So notice how those two groups represent 34% apiece. So that's about 68% of the entire social spectrum. Then we also have your laggards, AKA your traditionalists. Now, these folks, they're just hard-headed. Like when you're just trying to like tell them, yo, look, if you don't like, I'll give you a better example. Actually, no, I'm not going to give away the secret. So, but we'll just say it's like, these are sometimes known as the folks in whom which that have just like had to hold off. Like they were just like, you know, renegade, like fight against the machine, against the system. I'm not going to do this until honestly, they're really forced and backed into a corner to ultimately buy. And you typically see a lot of these folks that are like, you know, the folks that are like holding on to like iPhone 4s or iPhone 5s. And then it's like they are like holding on for dear life, though that all the technology is like moving forward and they don't even get to benefit any of these things. Why? Because they don't care, right? They're like the Warren Buffetts of the world. Like, I'm not going to buy an iPhone. I have this flip phone that just works perfectly. until, say, for example, their phone drops or it breaks and some type of event really forces them to have to really change that theory. So yeah, there you have it. And so they represent 16% of the other side of the market. Now, here's an interesting thing here that we got to look at. When we look at it in the sense of, if we go all the way back to the left side, if you look at the bottom, we see this thing called the increased perceived opportunity as well as decreased perceived risk. So there's opportunity over risk. So now when you think about it, when you think about folks who innovated or started, let's flip it over to startups. When you start a company, you're considered like really the innovator of this company when you create a product. And so really the increased perceived opportunity is really high, but at the same token, your decreased risk is ultimately going to be established over time. Now, of course, when we think about it in the beginning, there's very little risk here. I mean, because you're not really risking anything significantly. But as we say, for example, move on through the process, you'll see how this risk increases. So for example, now let's say, for example, I create this product and now essentially I got my early adopters. Now, of course, some of those early adopters are associating some of this risk, but then also at the same token, they're taking the opportunity to actually benefit. Now, you see these folks all the time, right? They're either on a Kickstarter or some type of Indiegogo campaign that they bought into, and they're like, hey, this is like modern moving technology or, you know, out of this world technology or whatever it is. So I'm definitely going to eat into this. So they have a little bit of risk. And then you have, and when you think about it from the innovator's perspective, you know, the risk is also starting to increase because now you're starting to bring other people into your space and they're like literally now going to start giving you their opinions. And now we have the early majority. Now the early majority is kind of like the folks in whom which that you kind of see like after, like put it into perspective. Innovator starts company, early adopters, think of those as like your early stage investors or your early investors. Then you go through this process and period from through C to let's say series D rounds, and then you decide to go public. Now, at this point in time, like before you go public, you're pretty much at this early majority stage. And with this early majority stages, it's pretty much you've gone to a certain point of scale that essentially that now, essentially everybody is now starting to step in and the market is really starting to really perceive exactly what it is exactly that you built. So whatever your product is, they're now starting to perceive it much more in a wider perspective. And then at this point, you're like, hey, maybe it's time that we go public. So now we're on the publicly traded market. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Now, notice where where it goes from one side from increased perceived opportunity all the way to the other side. Now, on the other side is decreased perceived opportunity. So the further that we get to this point, the more that the opportunities start to leave you. So, for example, if we look at the late majority of skeptics, now this is not a specific time frame. It's just over, you know, a subset of time. So that could be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. So then we see that they have much more increased risk because, of course, now the risk is more so on them because everything else ahead of time has already taken place. It's already transpired. And also at the same token, the opportunity itself is also starting to, the opportunity itself is perceived to be decreasing. Now, then we also have the laggards or the traditionalists, in which that honestly, it's like they're pretty much at the further end of the spectrum as it pertains to time, increased perceived risk, as well as perceived opportunity. So which pretty much means on one side, you see that there's a heavy opportunity, and then on top of that, not very much risk, and I've got a lot of time. On the other side, we see that, okay, hey, that there's, or I don't have a lot of time. On the other side, you see that there's a decreased opportunity. So I don't believe that I have a lot of opportunity here. I think that there's a lot of risk here. And then at the same token, I have a lot of time to literally make a decision. So honestly, I'm not going out anywhere. Interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
oh wait, I'll let you go. I have a question.
Oh, go ahead. You can stop me at any time.
Okay, so let's look at this. Well, there's two questions. One question is, how can we use this diffusion of innovation model to think about
the future?
Well, that was a later question. I figured you would, that was later, not for this part, but for options, like when it comes to perceiving, like when you're in the money, when you're out the money, near the money, all those things. That's one question. Yep. And then two, if you had to place your finger somewhere, where would you say where the money resides? Sorry, I had to say it because that song is stuck in my head.
I knew it. All right. So really where the money resides is really where the early adopters and the early majority of pragmatists are, or early majority, or AKA your pragmatists, your pragmatic people are. Now, of course, it's like if you were an innovator, then congratulations to you, because ultimately you get to reap the benefits of everybody else in whom which that will receive this and ultimately be a part of it. But really, it's really towards the early adopters and the early majority. So people who create the party, right?
Right.
Those are the folks in whom which that you want. Those are the groups that you want to be a part of. The folks in whom which that are coming into the party, it's like congratulations. There's nothing wrong with this. But when you're on the laggard side, and I'll get to this in a little bit, but ultimately it's like you're honestly, you missed out on a lot of the opportunity. When we look at it as it pertains to the options market, um, a lot of times people look out here like they're coming from the laggard standpoint, and then they're really trying to go high risk and do significantly high big bets and everything else. But really, a lot of the energy and everything else was already built in. So essentially, you're coming in late, and so now you're building off of all these things that have already taken place and have already kind of like plateaued. And then ultimately now it's just like, okay, you're on the downside of things. So that's not where you want to be. But a lot of when we talk about 98% of retail investors, 98% of retail investors really play out on this side of the pond.
Yeah, that's pretty crowded over there.
Yeah, or in the words of little bro Tebow, it's pretty chunky out there.
You do be seeing that.
But let's look at it a little bit further.
Yeah.
So Gardner had a research report back in 2020 of July, and of course, these things are subject to change, but it kind of gives you a pretty good look at exactly what is it that you should be seeing when we look at it, because this is also considered a pretty much innovation model. So when we think about it, we're seeing this diffuse right now in this perspective of time. Now you see certain things that will literally plateau, right? For example, up here, we've seen that things have started to peak as it pertains to inflated expectations. So when we think about that, this is the level in which that if we go back, this is just looking at time. This is literally just looking at time. This, on the other hand, looks at expectations over time. So when we think about expectations over time, we see that innovation has been triggered. And from that, we've seen that there are certain things that have already like peaked, like for example, social distancing technologies. We've already seen those technologies peak. Now, the light blue represents the things in which that plateau will be reached within 2 to 5 years. If you see it in white, then it's less than 2 years. And then if we see it in dark blue, then that represents 5 to 10. More than 10, you see like those little triangles, and then obsolete before plateau. Luckily, we don't see anything has become obsolete. But here we see, like, for example, embedded AI. So we expect that should be taking place over, say, for example, the next 2 to 5 years. But then from embedded AI and some other things, we should see explainable AI. But then if we look at some of the other things that have been triggered from innovation, look at this. We see private 5G, we see small data, we see also this thing called digital twin of the person, or citizen twin. We'll get to that a little bit later. That may be a whole nother episode.
I think it is, honestly.
But then we also have what is called responsible AI. And then on top of that, AI augmented development, and then composable enterprise. So we see a bunch of things that are really artificially intelligent focused, as you can see. But look at this. We have health passports. Now, interesting thing when we look at health passports, there is a company that has like literally been doing a lot as it pertains to gathering data about like your fitness, how is it that you sleep, also gathering information about your medical records if you share that with it. And then on top of that, embedding itself with other devices. So, I mean, honestly, who would have thought? And they already have over 1 billion users that use its ecosystem and platform. I wonder who that could be. But just imagine what happens when we get to a point of health passports. We see that happening in less than in 2 years. Well, says Gardner. Now, notice here, when we get to this part, we have this thing called the truth of disillusionment. So now we're starting to come off of this plateau. So now we have, like, for example, bring your own identity, ontologies and graphs, carbon-based transistors, all this other stuff. So it's like, this is kind of like, okay, hey, we've had, look at all the innovation sitting on the left side. Like, think about all those things as it pertains to expectations and the whole nine. The level of expectations will run very, very high up here, and we've hit our peak. And then we're just coming down off of it. But notice slope of enlightenment, plateau of productivity. Notice there's nothing out there. Now, one of the things in which that I kind of like held off on, and I wanted to discuss it, is the reason why I felt like these things are good for us to start talking about, even if we're just exposing you, and then sometimes it's going to seem like it's foreign, and that's okay. But the goal is that I would rather it be foreign, and also we start breaking it down piece by piece for each and every single one of you. So that way, as we move forward in the future, you are very much so aware of these things. So that way it's like, okay, hey, I've heard these things before, or now it challenges me to go research these things and look them up. Because believe it or not, a lot of these companies in which that also may be on the 31 and SIPs may also be impacting a lot of these things on the level of expectations over time.
I want to challenge the cousins to, this is another challenge, to take what you see on this graph, and you all organize yourselves, and this could be another thing where you present on these technologies, the companies that are involved, what the outlook is looking like, what it is exactly, your own thoughts, what you see, and share that with the cousins. So go for it.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying, like, go for it. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to do this on your own. Like, buddy up, link up, y'all.
So interesting thing though, because remember when we talk about diffusion of innovation,
Mm-hmm.
and this really hits home for me a lot. And I felt like I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up this part of the conversation.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Because we as a culture should be on these first three stages. We should be here. We should not be on the last two stages where essentially we're just trying to really be at a place where we either get in where we fit in. No, we should be the people that are literally creating the box for other people to fit. And I think that we've gone through so much time throughout our lives where we're on the backside of things because of the fact that we're afraid. It could be led by fear. That's definitely one of them. Another thing that could also be a detractor is essentially, a lot of times it's just the unknown. And so here at the Come Up series, you're going to be exposed to a lot of things, especially during this school. I mean, we're just going to put it out there. Here at this school, you're literally going to be exposed to a lot of things in which that ultimately are going to challenge you to think differently. We're going to see exactly, the spur of your imagination. Also when we think about it, we got to move on from this mindset of thinking about what was all the time and thinking about what will be, and then figuring out ways in which that we can be more pragmatic or being better change agents or even innovators of how is it that essentially that we can be a part when this needle moves forward, and when we spot opportunities, where can we be in? So for example, when we look at it on behalf of investors, many investors are on the trail end of these things, and we as a people, we're very much so on the laggard side.
As far as adopting though, because I do want to put it on the record that as a culture, we are the trend setters.
Correct.
It's just that there's systematic things in place, structural things in place.
Correct.
Where access is blocked. And
Yeah.
so with the Come Up series and learning to invest and building capital, this whole model is going to be changed.
Bingo. I'm glad that you took the words right out of my mouth. So I'm glad. Thank you, Jolyn.
I be getting fired up.
Oh, no, that's good. That's good. So that way, essentially, these things are no longer foreign to each and every single one of you. The more that we become more understanding. And one of the interesting things that kind of like sits on my mind that's always like a pretty cool thing, or I would say just interesting, because if you think about it, a lot of the AI stuff, I mean, look at the timeline. In the next 2 to 5 years, we'll reach a plateau within these areas. But think about the things that are coming. Digital twin of the person? multi-experience citizen twin? Huh, my God.
I don't think the world is ready for 2 Jolyn GCs in the place to be.
Imagine if they had 2 Mark Monroes.
Lord have mercy. I would put mine to work. My twin would be a worker, and then I would be the leisure.
I'd be a little bit too competitive, so I would try to compete with the other Mark.
So
I ain't gonna lie, I'm competitive, so I'm gonna try to compete.
Having dunk contests.
You know it. And then on top of that, seeing who could build a better AI structure.
That is funny.
But interesting thing, look at this though, differential privacy. And we also have DNA computing and storage. Like just, what? More than 10 years? So when you think about, which draws me to, if you notice here, I'm going to just run it back for y'all. You ready? You ready for this, Jolyn? And then I'm going to just roll through to the next slide.
Okay.
So we started here where we talked about the diffusion of innovation.
Right.
Then we see the diffusion of innovation really in work thanks to the research at Gardner. Interesting. One of your most favorite firms in which that was the best performing ETF of the market, or had the best ETFs performance in the market, was none other than ARK Invest. Now notice this, they have a model in which that they built based upon the diffusion of innovation. Interesting. Cue and pause for the effect. I'm just kidding. All right, so when we think about it though, they look at companies and businesses as it pertains to sales over time. So let's look at it, right? We have the total market, which floats above, right? Now, one thing I want you guys to remember is essentially, whenever you create something, you're never the total market. I think we all know this. I think that's just basic. For the first company that created, cloud services, like even look at Amazon, dominant in cloud services, but yet they don't make up the entire market because there's multiple other companies in this space. So then you had, for example, early adopters from, say, for example, the innovators. So we had the early adoption. Now notice this though, the main market ultimately starts to wake up as soon as we start to see innovation start to take place. So we have your early adopters, and then over a period of time, they're on a collision course. If this company is executing well, then they're on a collision course to meet with the main market. So early adopters, they plateau and then they come down. And as they're coming down, it hits Main Street. And then Main Street ultimately takes it. So the main market literally takes it up. Now, if you notice, we're coming close to, say, for example, total market. Now, this is very interesting when we look at companies, especially when you're investing. Yeah, we are now cracking the code for those of you that are trying to understand how ARK Invest literally focuses their portfolios. So stick with me. So when we look at ARK Invest and how they move, so now we have companies that are literally moving with main market because they've already dropped over time with early adoption. So that's out. It's phased. It is completely phased out. So now main market has picked it up and has taken it along for the ride. Now, with that being said, if you have a decent company or decent to really terrible company, then you're going to keep going down this path, and ultimately you're going to hit your wall or your ceiling as it pertains to total market. And this is where companies like ARK Invest, as an active portfolio management firm, this is where they say, all right, we're moving on from them. Like, for example, you saw that companies that were even good companies got dropped by ARK because of the fact that it's just like, hey, they look deeply into how each and every single one of these companies are doing their R&D and also where they're investing their dollars for the future. And this is where you see, say, for example, this diversion of going from main market, and then we make this pivot, just make this little quick turn to the right. And then let's carve out new market space. Yeah. So instead of just dying off with this market, then essentially we've now just created a whole new market. Now, interestingly, You're silly. We could discuss some examples if we want to. So when we think about it, we can discuss, say, for example, some companies.
Yes, let's get into it.
Like, we can go down some of the list of some of them 31 SIPs and look at some of those companies up top and see how each and every single one of these companies ultimately, like, and that's what the way you should be looking at it. Like, each and every single one of these companies, like, they have a total market in which that they're looking to address. We understand, and sometimes you can kind of like start to see it where you start to see that they're over time, year over year, that their growth is starting to slow down. And some folks will sit there and tell you, oh, well, that's the that's the law of large numbers. Okay, to a certain degree, yes, that is a fact. But what we're looking for is the pivot in scale to see, okay, hey, well, what's the next thing? I'll give you an example. Amazon started off as a grocery or as a company that sold books. Then they pivoted. Then as they realized that, okay, hey, we're reaching a total market as it pertains to books. Now let's start selling more stuff like, for example, CDs and, shoes and all that stuff after the acquisition of Zappos. Okay, great. So then there's a total market there. Then they went into this space as it pertains to saying, you know what, let's just sell everything. Everything becomes available on this e-commerce platform. But even then, that comes with a total market that can be addressed there as well. Now we have this thing called Amazon Web Services, which is the cloud services. That's a complete pivot, right? Because now investors are like, okay, well, we know that Amazon sells stuff, but what else do they do? Well, they now provide cloud solutions to those same other providers that ultimately need to actually be in the cloud and also sell their stuff. So that's a major pivot. And then from there, from learning from that data, we did another pivot as it pertains to within the market to now providing prime services. So like, for example, video, streaming, even gaming, those types of things. Then on top of that, now they're making another pivot strategy, which is what? Getting into autonomous driving as it pertains to either robo-taxis or also helping as it pertains to their drone delivery services, AKA logistics. Notice the different pivots that we kept seeing across the entire line of business as it pertains to Amazon. And each and every single time, it's showing you that, okay, hey, that they're willing to spend the money as it pertains to R&D. Now, what does a bad company look like? For example, let's take, for example, a Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble sold books. Shout out to all those folks who used to get books at Barnes & Noble.
It was good times, Mark. Good times.
You said what?
It was good times.
It was. But everything that has a beginning has an end.
Yeah.
And, the sun was setting on Barnes & Noble. And by the time when they were ready to make any type of pivots, it was too little too late. And thus, they became a one-trick pony. And from becoming that one-trick pony, they hit their total market. And in hitting their total market, they couldn't move on. And thus, after you reach that pivotal, that peak point, and after you've plateaued, you start to come down. Now, why do these things matter? When we look at, say, for example, companies that are now going public, a lot of your companies today are waiting to, say, for example, go public very later in their stages as it pertains to who they are as a company. Like, for example, you have companies like Airbnb that have been around for quite some time, and they've already gained so much market share that ultimately, why didn't they go public sooner? Interesting. And then on top of that, you have companies like Uber. By the time when Uber went public, you had to ask yourself, where's the growth? When you look at this model, right? When you start off with early adopters, of course, they phase out over time. And then they're just around like, hey, I remember that, like, for example, all those Tesla drivers. Oh, yeah, I started the movement when I bought the Tesla Roadster. You guys are just following in my footsteps. They get to wear the trophies. Congratulations to you. You get a medal. But then it's like, essentially, you get the main market that steps in. But if you're not innovating, then ultimately what it's telling you in this model, and when we go all the way back here, then sooner or later, you're going to phase out. So now you have to look at companies from a whole totally different perspective. The game, the board, and everything else of what we see is changing in front of our eyes right now. Like, for example, look at all the companies that are now gone public, like through the SPAC route.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot of companies that have now gone public, but yet they haven't proven their business models. So now they're bringing the early adopters. They're looking for early adopters and early investors, honestly, to really like accept their thesis to invest in their company. Now, me personally as an investor, I'm sorry, I'm not going to invest in a company that's on the publicly traded market that just doesn't make money. That just doesn't make any sense to me. But when we think about it, when we put it into perspective, you got to look at it in the sense that you're starting to see a shift take place, a huge shift take place. So now we went from Kickstarter and Indiegogo to now it's really starting to make its way to the publicly traded markets, where now the publicly traded markets are now the Indiegogo and Kickstarter, where you're funding, say, for example, a lot of these SPACs out here. And that's one of the reasons why it's like, even then you take it with a huge grain of salt, or essentially you have to be very, very careful, very, very skeptical. But at the same token, you're going to find folks that are going to be pragmatic. And that's one of the risks in which that you slightly run, because your perceived risk is just in the sense that you're just thinking about the innovation. And yeah.
I do want to say that this, I'm talking to the cousins. This is 2021.
Mm-hmm.
You all are aware. These are the rebound years now. And you saw that arc line, the arc invest line, and you saw that little tail kind of, pivot.
Mm-hmm.
That is where the Come Up Cousins thinking gets to be. You get to use this innovation framework as you assess all of your picks, as you assess your trading plan, and you have those pivots built in, because innovation and pivots are like hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Innovation dies if there's not pivots. So the ability to think ahead, the ability to plan ahead, the ability to see what's coming further down the road, and not just focus on, this is what I'm doing for 2021. That's cute. But how does it fit with your overall vision? So you look at your portfolio and like how you're approaching investing, you look at it that way. But then as in a personal aspect as well, if we apply this framework to our families, to our legacies, what is coming after us?
Mm-hmm.
What are we preparing? Why are we doing this? So start thinking about your legacy now. I know we're all, learning like the mechanics, like how to trade and, all that, but also think about the future. This is, as Tiwo says, this is bigger than options.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to take the time to really think about and really think and dream about what can happen when we are all in a place and space to invest in our own ideas, our own businesses, invest in one another, where you can simply have an idea, call up a cousin and say, hey, I have this idea, I'm doing this, blah, blah, blah. Raise the capital internally, and you can decide who gets to benefit from your genius, and not the other way around, where people are trying to exploit your genius and they're making money. You can look at the music industry as an example.
Mm.
So that's the place and space that I'm excited for, because y'all, like I say, it's a heist and it's also a takeover. It just is. We set the tone, we set the trends, we are the tastemakers. There is no creativity, no innovation without us, period. And so now that we are applying this innovation framework to our wealth building, we will have the ideas and the bag. Game over.
Game, set, match. I mean, I think for those in whom which that were kind of like, because I don't want anybody to be lost in the sauce here.
Yeah.
So try not to look at it too much as it pertains to the scientific part. You've heard me talk about like, looking at the last 2 years and saying what was.
Mm-hmm.
Remember tying this in together and saying, well, what will be?
Mm-hmm.
The way that we look at this peak point is looking at exactly like, okay, hey, have we reached that level of what the market expects to be like on the forefront? Like everything that you saw at the peak is happening now.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that's on the peak, it's happening now. Everything that's on the cusp of the peak, it's like, yo, we got next. It's like, hey, are you are you in line? Because I got next. And then when we see the things that are at the bottom, on the bottom left side, it's just like those are the things that are being created now. Those are the things that are brewing. Like it's just like I don't drink coffee, so I'm gonna just have to like explain it. But if like for those in whom wish that drink coffee or whatever it is, or let's just imagine, I'll put it into the form of Saturday morning. Reminding yourself as a kid where on Saturday morning sometimes your parents would cook. And you'd just be waking up, but sometimes the smell of the food woke you up. And it somehow, some way got you to get up out of bed to literally get dressed and come downstairs and sit at the table and eat your food. Think about it like that. The smell itself hit a peak point to literally grab your attention at the top. So you are no longer an early adopter, because if you're an early adopter, you set your alarm clock or something like that.
Or
like, hey, I'm up at this time, yo, whatever it is, anytime before the time that your parents were done cooking or before, you are considered like within that first half of the spectrum. Now, if you are the person that's waking up when that smell hits your nose, then ultimately you are like, yo, now it's time for me to get myself together and then like, yo, go ham, go eat food and get on about my day. Think about it like that. When we think about your investments, when we think about your strategies and everything else, when we put that into perspective, you want to be before the peak point reaches. And this is where it comes to, like I said, looking at the what will be. A lot of the things that we talk about in the what will be, like, for example, smart cities, you can't have smart cities without, say, for example, having the artificial intelligence and the infrastructure there. Like, for example, private 5G. You can't have it. It just won't happen. You can't have, like, say, for example, robotics without artificial intelligence as well as responsible AI. You can't have it. So when we think about a lot of these things in which that come forth and go into play, you have to ask yourself, where am I when I'm thinking about my investment strategy of the things in which that I'm going to put my capital towards, and where is it going? And are the people or are the companies or are the ETFs that I'm invested into, will they help me get there? Are they on this journey to help me get there? And where are we? Like, for example, if you're talking about autonomous self-driving, well, I mean, technically, we're almost at peak point. I mean, if you've been hearing about folks talk about robo-taxis, if you've been seeing tons of vehicles and everything else, then we're pretty much at peak point. It's almost a matter of time until essentially the rest of the main market starts to step in and saying, hey, now we're providing vehicles that have this level of autonomy, and now all vehicles will carry it. It's only a matter of time. Remember, the entire thing on this entire spectrum of how we look at it is over time. Now, whatever changes over time could be, say, for example, your expectations. You can look at a company's sales. You can look at, say, for example, a company's growth. You can look at all those things and then traject it out over time and say, okay, hey, has the main market caught up? And how you look at the main market is, think of main market as the folks in whom which that adopt. And then on top of that, you look at total market as it pertains to like for example, the other players that are out there in the space. But sooner or later, they plateau. And you can go back and look at many industries. You can look at many sectors and see that, hey, they have plateaued. For example, homework for everybody. Or, just simple, let's just do a simple, call and response, shall we? Name a sector that you believe that has already peaked and is on its way down. Go ahead, throw it up in the chat. Name a sector.
I'm looking at it. They talking about, I'm not gonna even say what they're talking about right now. It's funny though. A sector, y'all. We talk about the sectors before we start the show.
We did. There are specific sectors. There we go. Yep. Sectors that have peaked and now they're starting to come down. There it is. Boom. If you said energy and oil, then congratulations. Somebody has no chill. They said Intel.
Oh, man.
Financial services. Have they peaked? Consumer staples. Have they peaked? We look at those things. Real estate. Has real estate peaked? That's how we look at it in the sense of how is it that we see the world. This just isn't about the United States. This is global, y'all. This is global in the perspective of, does the world really need this anymore? Does the world really need oil anymore? Or can we find alternative ways in which that we can heat things up and that we can provide energy to? And for all of you that literally took part in this little exercise, then honestly, that gives me great feeling to know that none of you are being left behind. Why? Because you just understood the diffusion of innovation. If you were able to answer, then you understood the diffusion of innovation.
Congrats.
I like it when we play YouTube magic.
YouTube magic. Congratulations. No cousin left behind.
There it is. Okay. Well, that's all I've got.
Yeah. Well, that was a whole lot.
I know.
I hope everyone will go back, watch it, and also, again, take the initiative to learn about all that technology that you saw on the bell curve. And then also, Mark, I know people were asking for the source. Where can they go?
The what?
They were asking for the chart. Where can they see that chart?
I will post the link in the description down below.
Perfect. And I think that's everything.
Crazy, right? Just imagine what people just learned today. Should we just do a quick little recap?
That's always a good thing.
So today you learned the diffusion of innovation, a part 1 of 3, class or series. And then on top of that, the next thing that we learned is essentially, how to apply it. Oh, look at that. Look at that. TiVo's already on it. So we figured out how is it that it's applied. So how does it work and how is it applied? And 3, we looked at essentially what's happening now versus also what's happening over a period of time. Mm-hmm. And then 4, you got to understand and wrap it all in a single bow of how is it that your favorite investment firm, ARC, makes their investments. We literally just took you through how is it that ARC literally puts together its strategy. Now, of course, this is part 1 of 3, so it's going to get a little bit deeper. So we may even teach it on Thursday. You never know. But yeah, now you're starting to understand, and our goal is to get each and every single one of you to think like how they do. Because once you learn how to think like how they do,
I mean, couple that with your already inherent genius, and it's a whole different vibe. And your consciousness.
All right, y'all. Shall we close it?
Yeah, because we have another meeting. So
We do. Well, if you like what you saw, thank you. Go ahead and, you could go ahead and be gracious and hit the like button. If you didn't like it, that's fine. Go ahead and hit the dislike button and tell us what is it that we could have done better. I know that it was a lot of information. But if you also want to be a part of the movement here called the Come Up series, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And then on top of that, if you want to be in the know for when we're going to hit another, episode or something else, go ahead and hit that bell so you can be a part of the notification squad, aka the Cool Kids Club. I guess until next time, I'm Mark Monroe.
And I'm Jolyn GC, and the place to be.
And this was your Come Up on Trade Talk Tuesday. Happy New Year, everybody. We'll see you on Thursday. Peace.
Wait.
What?
Sorry. I think we hit a record on the live, on the
We did?
on the audience. Yeah. Sorry. I just looked at it.
Well, thank each and every single one of y'all. Like, y'all are awesome. Wait, what was our record?
I believe it was 3.2. We'll have to check the archives. That's the only number. I don't really pay attention all the time, but I just happen to look. And so the last number I remember was 3.2. But it's 3.3.
Thank y'all.
Yeah. And I think we're over 37,000.
Look at us coming up in the world. The come up is coming up.
Moving on up. Okay, sorry.
Well, y'all, we'll see y'all on the next one. Thank you so much for just being a part of this. We know that it was a lot, but we're going to give you guys a lot. We're going to keep it going. But at the same token, no cousin left behind. And I'm probably sure that there's some cousins lurking out there. They're going to be there to support you in this process.
Wait, Mark, how much is tuition again?
Wait, what?
How much is tuition again for the
Come Up School of Investing is literally a free school. I mean, we are a free public school for all. So honestly, there is no tuition. There are no fees. Honestly, if you like to donate towards causes that the school supports, that is fine. We love to help the community that surrounds us. But outside of that, no, there is no tuition. We don't do that.
Everyone gets a scholarship.
This is a scholarship by a wonderful endowment that has already been paid for by the ancestors. So that is, you see what I did there?
I see what you did there.
Scholarships have been paid for by the ancestors. There is no tuition needed, no tuition necessary. All right, y'all. Is there anything else, Jolyn?
Oh, that's it. That's it.